Thank you, Pastor Tim. We would like to, first of all, thank the CUC for having this opportunity to speak to you this afternoon, as well as the Pennsylvania Conference. We are glad to be here.
And more than delighted to be here. I know that you have heard a lot of story and instruction, but I bet you have a question in your heart. And this is the question: what does it take to transform a church in the community into a community church?
All right. So we want to show you a very brief video about what's going on in our local church before we move forward.
Let's take a look. It is very hard to imagine that just a little bit over a year ago, that church did not even exist. Only 15 months into existence, our church was the product of merging two existing congregations, a company in Allentown and an aging church from a neighboring city. Both congregations needed a church building, but they did not have the financial resources to purchase it. So they joined the financial resources and they combined their effort to acquire an old building that was damaged by a fire. It used to be a mosque. The renovation was a huge challenge. Let's take a look at some pictures. Before the renovations, we had one congregation, the small company, meeting at a very secluded area of the city. And the aging congregation probably had a few members, total 20 probably at the most. So at that time, Brenda and I were called to serve by the senior pastor, Fernando Rocha, and the Hispanic ministry director, Pastor Saud Elias, to serve at the church. And at that moment, I was reminded of this quote by Mark Twain, who says, "The two most important days in our life are the day we are born and the day we find out why." I believe the same applies for churches. So I meet up with the church leaders and I ask the question, why are we born in as a new church in Allentown? It's a new congregation. We pray over it, and after a season of prayer, we decided that the vision would be to become a community church. But how do we go about it? We develop a strategic plan.
So the strategic plan is basically our roadmap for the year, but we are not creating it on our own. We are actually listening to current, former, and potential members of the church. So we're listening to their feedback as we put together a plan that has four main areas, and that is community service, social activities, mentoring, and evangelistic activities. So before we got there, like I said, we have to listen to the audience, listen to who we're trying to address. So with that in mind, we put together something called the resource mapping, and it's basically looking at what is surrounding the local church. So if you look at this map, the red circle is where our church is located. And then the red dots are different faith-based and community-based organizations that are surrounding us. So what we did is we actually reached out to those leaders within those organizations and schools as well to let them know, listen, we are actually starting this new church, but we want to be partners from the get-go. And this is our mission. We want to care for our community. We want to know how can we as a church serve the community. So with that in mind, we put together a communication plan. And basically, it's very simple. So it was all about visibility. It's about establishing a brand, who we are and what we're all about, and telling our story. So some of the examples included simple things such as appropriate signage, making sure we're on Google Maps so when they search us online, we're able to be found, establishing social media pages or platforms, but not just setting them up. You actually have to engage in them. You have to provide resources and telling the story in a way that is meaningful to the reader. So, as you can see, this is a picture of our church's grand opening. We had a total of 22 community leaders joining us, including the city's mayor, representatives from the Allentown School District. We had representatives from the Boys and Girls Club. We had city council members. We had the chief of police, the fire department, and so on and so forth. They came forward because they realized that the vision that we had for this church was something that was relevant to them, and that's why they showed up. And it's not just about showing up for one event. It's about continuing that communication and partnership with the community leaders. So that also meant establishing an e-newsletter so that we are constantly letting our church members, former members, and potential members, community leaders, and just letting them know what's going on in the church and what activities they can help to join forces. So we have that constant communication. We set a slogan for the church, which is "Come as you are," and we developed or designed t-shirts that help to identify who we are when we're out in the community, so that when they see the t-shirt and they see the Adventist logo, it's all about branding and image, right? So they know who we are, and we're not just a church just gonna show up once in a blue moon. They're gonna see us a lot. So that's what's been happening for the last 15 months. And this is just a picture of some of the youth wearing the t-shirt. We've also been able to share our stories through Visitor Magazine. We're very grateful for the Visitor Magazine team. They've been very, very effective in helping us tell our story. And it's not a one-off. It should be ongoing. We use social media to tell our story as well. We contacted a local TV station, and we went to this TV show to talk about what is the church doing to help the community in terms of community service, but also social gatherings that would be meaningful, being that isolation is a big issue in our community. So, with that said, that leads us to the first component of the strategic plan, which is community service, and that's what we're talking about today, right? So, the ribbon cutting ceremony, which was part of the grand opening, wasn't just a grand opening for the church. It was actually a community benefit too. So we named it Grand Opening Community Benefit to benefit those families who had moved to Allentown recently from Puerto Rico. They actually were victims of Hurricane Maria. So there were about 400 new students in the new district. And so when we asked people to come to the grand opening, they were encouraged to bring items of clothing or anything that would help those families just because they needed the help. So having that there was really important. We have health fairs, but not just to have a health fair. We actually had this event, we had students from the Blue Mountain Academy join us. Not only join us, but they were part of coordinating the event, having prayer sessions with the members, health screenings, just letting them know of what was going on, something new with the new church and what our vision was, and how we want to help and also engage them. So we've also had, this is one of our clothing drives for the Puerto Rican families who were moving to Allentown. Prayer, like I said before, and this in particular was a community benefit or community service activity where we helped about 150 individuals in our community that are facing or experiencing homelessness, mental illness, addiction, and women who have been victims of domestic violence. So these were toiletry items as well as literature, and we had other items in there that were needed. We didn't just make up a list of things that they needed. We actually asked the organizations that serve these communities, what are some of the items that are relevant for these groups? And this one was very recent. That was for Global Youth Day, where we had our young people prepare and serve a meal for 80 homeless men at a local shelter. And this is a group of the youth. This is a multi-church activity. We usually like to invite our neighboring Adventist and non-Adventist churches to help us. This was a photo of our anniversary, which, again, Edwin will talk more about it later, but this was us with the banner on the back. We had the red carpet going, and we just wanted people to see the Adventist logo and be sure that they are familiar with it.
And we are so happy to have the support of the conference on those activities. Now, the second bullet that we have in our strategic plan is social activities. Sometimes we don't think of social activities as part of our mission because we are afraid to be labeled as social clubs. However, I remember talking about this with Pastor Andres Peralta, who is the Associate Director of the Youth Global Mission for Pathfinders. And he told me, Edwin, the very first time that I put place into a Seventh-day Adventist church, I was invited to play basketball. And I found Jesus. And now I'm a pastor. Not only a pastor, I'm a world leader. So based on that philosophy and with that testimony, we set out our social activities, which include popcorn night, Domino's night is very effective for Latino, if you know what I'm talking about, youth socials, and game nights. Not video games specifically, but games that involve physical activity and mingling instead of isolation. Also, we have, for the youngest, karaoke, and the movie nights are well attended, and the karaoke are so much fun.
The other aspect, the third aspect, is mentoring. And what we did with this is based on the assessment, based on what we heard from the members of the community, what would be some topics that would be relevant to them, not what we thought they needed. So they gave us a list, and based on that list, We worked on a plan and made it happen. What are some of those topics? They wanted to talk about suicide, sex, addiction. They wanted to talk about child abuse. They wanted to talk about domestic violence, bullying, how to deal with that, depression. So we brought specialists from the community, from that list of community leaders that I mentioned before, to give them a platform and teach our youth and their families about topics that were meaningful to them. So that's where the partnership also continued. We talked about health. We actually have a 6-month series, health series, where we are opening it to the community as we do with all of our activities, where we are advertising it online. It's on the calendar of events for the city of Allentown. It's listed on the newspaper. It's posted at doctor's office and so on and so forth. The fact that I work for a health network is very important because when we have health-related activities, we're able to partner with our hospital, which is great. So these are just some of the pictures that depict what's going on. And I just want to point out, when these community leaders come to our church and speak about a certain topic, it's not just about the topic. They actually create or develop a relationship with the listeners, specifically with the youth, because they'll stick around and ask questions, and they develop that relationship and get to meet someone that otherwise they would have no access to, maybe through school or stuff like, but not through the church. So having those individuals come into the church and talk to our kids and our family and teach them about a specific topic is really meaningful for us.
Now, in order to accomplish our mission, we had to keep up with the church building, new building payments, right? Those doesn't stop. So we needed to grow. So we set out the first evangelistic series by the youth, or with the youth, and followed by that was the very first evangelistic series for the adults. Our guest speaker was Pastor Ruben Ramos. We are greatly appreciate it because of his disposition to come to our church. And the result of that evangelistic series was 9 new people got baptized at the end of the series, including a wedding of a person that was born in the church, but then went out at the early in their youth years. So, also we hosted a couple of events. This one in particular was a division-wide initiative called Vida GPS. We hosted Pastor Alejandro Bullon was the guest speaker on that particular one. And this initiative called Faith for Family which is led by Elder Tim Bailey, was hosted at our church. And we are also very grateful because the conference supported us and assigned a Bible worker to accomplish the ministry of evangelism. Now, what does it take? What does it take to transform a church in the community into a community church? That strategic plan that we discussed today did not come out of blue. That strategic plan that we discussed came out of this quote. How does that work? Christ's method alone will give true success, reaching the people the Savior mingled, highlighted, with men as one who desired their good. He showed his sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. Take a look at the next slide. Community service, reaching the people. Social activities, mingled. Mentoring, won their confidence. Evangelistic activities, then he bade them follow me. So if you ask me, what does it take to transform a church in a community into a community church? My answer will be, just follow Christ's method. Thank you.